Oh, good. Thank you, and welcome back to the second part in our series today, looking at residential aged care. So you've joined the Navigating My Aged Care website educational series, and I'm Marie Montgomery, and your host for this amazing series. We're almost to the end. It's been going for quite some time now. We're at step 5 today, and we're really, this session, going to be extrapolating, I guess, aged care agreements and advocacy in aged care. I have some amazing panellists on my right. I have Rodney Lewis. Thanks, Rodney. He's the Senior Solicitor at Elder Law Legal Services. Thanks for being with us. I'm sure you're very busy.
Thank you for having me.
That's a pleasure. And then Ray, lovely Ray Horsburgh, the advocate here in Sydney at Seniors' Rights Services, who joined us earlier and gave us some great information on what to look for in residential aged care. Thanks again, Ray, for joining us.
Pleasure, thank you.
I'm going to ask you, Rodney, we've discussed it with Ray earlier, what is it that you're so passionate about in regards to, I guess, assisting people navigate my aged care and also looking at their ageing in regards to, I guess, a legal perspective?
Well, I guess there are 2 points in time when lawyers might be useful in the aged care system, although we're pretty much absent at the moment, I have to say, and we have been for many years. But there are many reasons for that. I won't go into that. But the 2 main points are the point of entry,
All right.
and when and if there is some problem with the care and somebody might be harmed or injured. Or there's another variant on that, and that is where families fall into conflict about the care.
Yes.
So at those points, I believe, and my practice has been, it certainly involves this, that lawyers have something to contribute there. But the tools that we are given, especially in the aged care context, are a bit like giving a computer expert carpentry tools to fix the computer.
Okay.
So they're not perfect, and thus lawyers are not particularly familiar with the aged care system. But there is a lot of work which a lawyer can address, and really nobody else, because it involves legal recourse to all sorts of things. So, and if I might just add, I look at it and I've been involved directly in it for about 20 years.
Yeah.
I look at it through the prism of human rights. I spend a lot of my spare time in human rights, and I came to realise that aged care and the vulnerable aged need support, they need assistance, they need advocates, and we must all try our best to support them.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. And I'm only hoping that this series assists somebody out there in navigating my aged care and understanding the process of what services are available, what is absolute in those services, and being able to be strong with providers and saying these are the services and this is my aging as I see.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Bit of housekeeping. Up on your right hand corner you will find a button for Q&A. Please get on board and ask us some questions. And there's a Facebook page as well. Come join the Facebook page and tell us what you've found, or discuss with others steps in the navigating my aged care process and what you found easy or difficult, or tips of the trade, I guess. Great way to meet other people going through the same journey. Excellent. So this particular webinar, as I said, we're going to be looking at aged care facility agreements and the legal aspects of residential aged care. We'll touch very briefly on, again, on some of your fees that you will be asked or will be discussed in regards to your legal aspects. And then most importantly, weaving through that, and Ray will be advocacy and how important advocacy services can assist you in these aspects of making that big decision, making those big decisions. Yeah, beautiful. Excellent. So what When we agree to go into aged care, and this is from a legal point of view, what are some of the contracts? What does an aged care agreement look like?
Well, there are many kinds of aged care. For me, as a lawyer, they fall into two categories. One is where the provider has a contract which extensively deals with the fees, how they're calculated, how they're going to be paid, when they terminate, and of course it deals also with the accommodation. Now, then there's a line which can be drawn between one kind of contract and another, in my experience.
Yeah.
And that is where, for example, the Charter of Rights is either incorporated in the contract or it's merely referred to in the contract. Big difference though. If it's incorporated into the contract, that means that it may be enforceable, just like any other contract. Two parties, if something goes wrong, then one party might seek legal advice, might even take some action. But if it's merely referring to the Charter of Rights, then the rights don't necessarily come as enforceable clauses coming out of the aged care principles. The only recourse in that case is for complaint to the complaint system. So that's one part of an agreement. The agreement is that there are a number of things that are required to be in the contract. One of them is the way in which the charges are going to be calculated.
So clearly stepped out for the client what charges and what's involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are others, the standard of care, but again, that's normally, or it's often found to be just a reference to the standard of care which is in the Aged Care Act itself. And that, again, means it doesn't make it enforceable. So, yeah, there are a number of things that need to be in it. One of the things at the outset, though, that the Aged Care Act makes clear is that the provider is expected not only to produce a contract and give it to the incoming resident or their representative, but also help them to understand what is in the contract.
Okay.
Now, here's a nice little conundrum. In fact, it goes further than a conundrum. It's a conflict of interest. If you have somebody who's going to sell you something, for example, and has a contract and says, now let me explain it to you, then you wouldn't let an estate agent or the owner of the property you're going to buy explain the contract to you, would you?
No.
And yet, the Aged Care Act itself says this is what must happen. So I've always found that most carers. But it's also ineffective, I think, when it's not right, because the provider will almost certainly, that's when it's done, and when they actually do explain, and I think there's a lot of non-explanation. When somebody takes a contract and then the director of nursing or whoever it is says, right, well, we'll see you in a couple of days or next week, but the explanation isn't always given. But there's a very important point to be made about explanation. You can explain what's in the contract, and that is pretty clear. Anybody who can read English can explain what's in the contract. But there are many things that are not in the contract, which almost certainly are never dealt with by the provider and explained.
Okay. So
Not in my experience.
Before we jump onto those, for somebody out there who's going, right, I'm about to sign up with this particular residential facility provider, and I've never signed such a contract before. What would be the must-haves in that contract? Does that make sense? I guess what we're trying to make this is as easy as possible for somebody out there going, okay, so Rodney said, I need to have these things in place. What are some of the pivotal things that can safeguard them in regards to this contract?
Okay, I think I'd say there are three things.
Okay, good.
Let's just deal with three basic things. One, there's a Charter of Rights.
Okay.
Make sure the Charter is actually a promise in the contract. We will give you all of the rights that are in the Charter of Rights.
Okay.
That's number one.
Good.
And that's despite the fact that you'll probably get a signed copy of the Charter at the time. But if you notice carefully, it's not part of the contract, it's a separate document, and that's the way the Minister designed it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Charter of Rights should be actually part of the promises in the contract. Second thing, there should be some standard of care actually stated and promised.
Okay.
We promise to give you the highest possible care in the state of New South Wales, or we have been approved as the best provider in New South Wales, and that's the way we'll be providing care for you. Some kind of a description of the standard of care. And bear in mind that the background to that is that inside of the Aged Care Act, I have counted 7 variations on what the standard of care is.
Okay.
It's actually in the legislation, but it's expressed in 7 different ways. And also, in the consumer law, there are 3 other standards which will be in there whether or not you ask for it. And then lastly, so that's 1, the Charter, 2, some expression of the standard you're going to get, and the third one, because when you're in aged care, if something seriously goes wrong, and I mean by that an amputation because a pressure sore hasn't been recognised, right? Or pneumonia because the sheets were left off before the cool change came through and the windows were open. There's any number of causes of serious harm and injury. Well, you don't want to be going hunting a barrister and a solicitor because, and in fact, if you're 85, you couldn't care less about the money. But what you might care about is your rehabilitation, the restoration of your health, specialist physicians, special days out if that's what helps you to recover. Who's going to pay for it? Well, if there's a fault on the provider, how are you going to get them to actually do it without some kind of an order? Easy. Ask for an arbitration clause. That means you don't have to go to court. You might need a lawyer, but you don't have to go to court. The court might even come to you in the form of an arbitrator who can make a binding decision. So there's 3 options which I think should be in every residential care contract. And bear in mind that with about 100,000 residential care contracts every year, which is equivalent to the number of people who are taken in every year, all of them are just out there and nobody knows what's in them.
Okay.
There's no register of them, there's no report from providers on what they put in.
Would you advise security of tenure to be in the residential agreement as well, Roger?
Well, I've looked at that. There is, in fact, no security of tenure so far as a lawyer is concerned. Security of tenure is a phrase which is used if you have a title to land or you have a lease on land, even if you have some, let's say, a life interest in land. But when it comes to aged care, you don't actually have what is always understood by lawyers as security of tenure. And because the ministers and the department have chosen to use it as a legal phrase, it is to some extent misleading. Because the bottom line is that people cannot, they are not guaranteed a permanent place. Not only that, they're not guaranteed a place which, say, is the room in the southeast corner on the top floor, because they can be moved. But also, as I've said, usually it's in relation to conduct, but it could also be the capacity of the aged care service to deal with the way in which their health may decline, that you might be asked to go. So the short answer is you don't actually have security of tenure. The Department of Health uses that term and puts under it the conditions under which you're staying in a nursing home.
Okay. So, we're getting back to some of the questions that we had some questions previous in the first webinar, and apologise that we didn't get to finish those. So I'm going to quickly go across to Ray. So, question from RS in Adelaide: for people with no family supports, who can practically assist them to pack up their belongings and move in?
A very perplexing issue, and it's an issue facing older people as they lose community, lose relatives, friends, and we occasionally get this question as advocates. It is impossible for us to answer because there are no formal resources in what advocacy does, but I'd most definitely be looking at local community services, whether it be the council, whether it be a local community service that may work within the community for assistance or at least some information on the best place to go to. And I'm sorry I can't give a definitive on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's great. Thank you, Ray. Also, RS in Adelaide. So, hello, RS in Adelaide. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Who can support the older person to access My Aged Care? So,
well, I assume that OPAN and the Council of Ageing New South Wales have navigator trials going on. I'll probably leave it to your expertise to explain.
Yeah, no. There's been 63 trials across Australia, and they're all out there to, I guess, see ways in which we can improve navigating My Aged Care through information hubs, educational sessions such as these. There are specialist workers out there as well in regional and remote areas to try and improve access or understanding the aged care system. Wonderful. Well, this is a powerhouse of learning here today, and we have Rodney Lewis, solicitor here, who's going a little bit beyond my expectations here, Rodney.
Well, can I just...
It's an interesting conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
It's good to get a legal point
So
of view
important, I
regarding this
agree.
from an advocacy, and Ronnie brings up some important points, and contracts can be just put in the drawer and forgotten, but a point of reference is for advocacy.
Yeah.
So people may not have read, or that contract is incomplete.
Yeah.
Which we find a lot of the times.
Okay.
But after the advocacy process has gone over, and if we do meet a gridlock, the option is the aged care complaints, the safety commission. As far as our legal service, the elder person's legal service, in anticipation of this question, our principal solicitor would say that our solicitors don't handle contracts of this nature, because that's probably all we would do.
Yeah.
But if there's an anomaly, if there's a caveat, for example, in a contract, people may get advice from our solicitors.
And I guess that goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, in that being prepared and ageing is so much more safer or better in many ways for the person whilst they're shopping around to think about. Like you said, we buy houses, we get married, we get divorced, we do all of these things, and they have a legal component to it which we don't even blink about. And yet, when we sign a contract that is for this further journey of our life, and it is to do with where we reside and how we reside and what services that they provide, so important, isn't it?
It is. It is. We've been given packet to write on for centuries, and that's where we record things that we talk about and things that we agree on.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't agree on all
well,
very clear.
right.
Oh, excellent. So again, I'm trying to be as specific for the resident, to be resident out there, or consumer, and I know you don't like the term consumer. Not for
people in aged care like that.
Yeah. And we find that a lot across Australia, and that's quite a common conversation we have at our community events when we do go across. So I do apologise to anyone out there utilising the word consumer. It is, I guess, this is a good question. Does it actually provide a greater law in regards to consumer law or protection?
It does. I think that the Department of Health and the providers may not have computed all of the outcomes of raising this awareness of the fact that their customers are consumers. I did a little study not so long ago. I noted that, and this is all very much about the dignity of the person, what you call them. In the Act, from the very get-go in 1997, we had the rights principles, but they were the user rights principles, which is a pretty neutral term, not the sort of term that you would normally apply to a human being.
No.
I wasn't very happy about that. And then we moved on to care recipient, which is very inelegant to talk about a person in those terms. I like the word resident as one at least reasonably respectful term. But now we come to consumer. Now, if you want to be called a consumer, then of course you want to make sure that you have all your consumer rights. And of course all of the literature recently has been about consumers and their rights. But actually, all consumers need to know, and those in aged care most particularly, that consumer rights are found in the Australian consumer law, and there are rights such as a reasonable quality for the services that you receive, that they are fit for purpose, that they are delivered in a timely manner. I don't know how many of my clients have, and usually my clients are the adult children of the resident, but I don't know how many of them have complained about continence pads and the untimely way in which they are dealt with on many occasions. Have a look at the consumer law. It has something expressly and directly to say about timely service. Then there's unconscionable conduct, that when you provide a service you mustn't do that in an unconscionable way. Now, everybody knows that there's been a lot of talk about restraint, unlawful restraint in the Royal Commission and previous inquiries such as Oakden. Unlawful restraint. I wonder if we could imagine how many businesses would treat their consumers by unlawfully restraining them and then try to deny that wasn't unconscionable conduct. So you see, unconscionable conduct is there as well. And there's misleading conduct in the consumer law. And finally, also to do with restraint, there's a prohibition on the use of force in the delivery of services. So, if consumers we are in the aged care system, then consumers we must be, and we must be informed.
Yeah. Informed, absolutely. So, let's get back to these agreements.
Okay.
So you said that there were three things that must be in the agreement.
Yeah.
But when I come into, and I'm trying to bring this back down to the simplest denominator just to make it easier for everybody, they are expected to have services, as you said, at a very high level, and that was very important. When it comes to fees, what are some of the, and we're not financial advisors, I will add that caveat there, and you need to speak to a financial advisor and obviously Centrelink or anyone else involved. But when it comes to a contract, what are the types of fees that they need to be aware of that they're going to be signing for in this agreement?
Well,
Either or.
Under the user rights principles, probably the policy, how the provider comes to the equations, because negotiation is possible with refund and accommodate with the deposit. That is really, really important. The documentation of, and the forms go into the Department of Human Services, they're sent to the provider, to the resident. So the documentation of the fees, the accommodation deposit, there are different ways of, payments, how that's worked out. There's a threshold.
Yes.
There are some residents that may be concessional. The Aged Care Act states that those that can afford to pay a little bit more will pay a little bit more than income tax. So that has to be documented very, very well, precisely in the service agreement, in the contract. The invoices, the monthly invoices, are really important. Plain English is what Rodney was talking about before. How is plain English? How is information given to the residents so that they understand? And this is the cause of concern, because it's not necessarily plain English. It's not explained. There's not other methods that a resident can use because of disability or cognitive impairment to understand this stuff. It's really, really, really important because it causes anxiety for an older person.
A lot of anxiety. I mean, if you weren't aware of a bill that would be coming in and then suddenly you need to find funding for that particular bill, then yes, I'm sure it's very confusing.
And the selling of a house, it is and how that relates to an income test assessment.
Yes.
Again, that information, that clear information is really important.
Particularly for rural and regional people, rural farmers, gifting their farms and all that sort of stuff as well. It makes such a difference in regards to their needs test, their assets, all that affects their aged care service. Again, I would definitely go and seek financial advice for any of those sorts of things. Excellent, good. So, in regards to, we're entering into agreement. So, what if I can't sign the agreement?
Well, if you can't sign the agreement, the user rights principles say that your representative can sign for you.
Okay.
And it allows a pretty wide range of people to be the representative of the elder or the person entering the aged care home. Obviously, it could be signed by their attorney, their power of attorney, that is the person appointed under that thing. And it could also be signed by their guardian if they have an appointed guardian.
Okay.
So there are plenty of other substitute decision makers, really, who can do that for them when they are unable to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
If they're able to do it with assistance, then that's what should happen. Assistance and advice and support.
Excellent. Can I choose not to sign the agreement?
You can. You can ignore it. And I suspect, and obviously there's no figures on this, I suspect that a lot of people will just say, oh, thank you for the contract, and then take it home and put it in the drawer and forget about it.
Okay.
Oh, nothing's going to happen to me. This is not going to be important, and my children will take care of the payments. My eldest son is the attorney that I've appointed, and he'll take it out of the bank, and sell the house if it has to. Of course, often there's a bit of controversy about selling a house, and of course there's important financial advice to be had if you do. But so anyway, it's the delegate of the person, and that's pretty wide.
Excellent. And advocacy. Where does advocacy services come into this, Ray, along the way in regards to signing contracts, etc.? Is there any? Can someone ring you before they sign a contract?
Limited. Advocacy is speaking, giving a voice to, in this case, a resident that may have concerns about documentation, the quality of their service. As we were talking about before, the first point in residents' rights is safe and high quality care that we talked about. So we discuss information being really important. We can give basic information regarding what is required in a contract under what it states under user rights under the Act, because we use that as a reference, along with other things. It could be the Nine-Nation Charter of Human Rights, it could be Australian competition and consumer law as far as home care goes. So if we're speaking on behalf of someone, we use that as a source. And it may mean, given permission from the resident, we may contact the organisation on their part. That's what advocacy is. It's a generic term, giving a voice to someone that may not necessarily have that voice. Now, as what's already been mentioned, it is a limited. The Aged Care Act can be limited as far as opportunity for redress, and if there is gridlock, the statutory government body is the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission.
So on that note, we're going to be finishing up for the day. I'd really like to thank you both, gentlemen, for being here and sharing your expertise and knowledge. I'm sure it's been of great assistance to our web viewers out there. Quick hello to the Newcastle ladies that I met at the community event last week. It was really great to have you there. We'll be back in 2 weeks, I think it is, on the 4th. For our final webinar series in this particular series. So, it's been great. Thank you guys, and everybody have a lovely day. Take care. Bye-bye.